sadly, and I know you guys will appreciate this. Sadly, I feel that athletes do not really get any recognition for, say, 12, 15 years of that life experience. We finish our career and we're a former pro athlete. And as I made a joke at a sports psychology conference recently, I said, I'm the only person speaking today without a PhD or without this or without that. But I have FPA at the end of my name, which is former pro athlete. And I really feel like athletes should at least be given some kind of credit for the years that they dedicated to being an athlete, because it's a huge sacrifice.
Welcome to Taking Your Shot, the pathway to soccer success, presented by Maverick Goalkeeper Academy and the Rising Star College Bound program.
Today, we're really excited to bring on Coach Belinda Halloran. She's coached soccer. She has her master's in sports psychology, and she's working for UCI, University of Irvine's men's soccer program and water polo. She's a world champion for triathlons. She performed for the Australian national team. Very excited to bring her on. We got our host, Jason Cisneros. I'm his co-host, Kris Hall. Welcome, Coach Belinda.
Yeah, I was blown away. I was checking out, I did a Google search and stuff and was looking through your LinkedIn and other things. And pretty incredible, all the things you've been a part of, and the high level of athletics and then the high level of performance coaching and all the elements. Really excited to meet with you today and just kind of hear about your story, your journey, and then also, for helping other players and families out there that will be interested in all these awesome things you're a part of.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've really probably found my calling with combining, having a background in sport, and what may be unknown to you guys is that I was actually coached by a sports psychologist for 12 of my 15-year career. She was an athlete as well, but I really developed an appreciation for what the mind can do. And I think while I loved coaching, gravitating towards more performance coaching, which includes the sports psychology component of it, really, for me, I feel like I may have found my calling, and I'm loving it because honestly, when I was a coach, I really felt like there was a massive deficit in regard to the level of athlete care that I experienced as an athlete. And then I wasn't seeing it here in the States as I was progressing higher up, the coaching ranks.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Was that kind of the thing where things sort of clicked for you, or you're like, something has to be done about this? Because I know Kris and I have talked before too, just on the pure soccer side. It's like, as an athlete, you're sort of at the mercy of this environment, right? That's created, and who's creating that environment? How are they designing it? Or what does that do to support you and the whole team and all those things? So can you go into a little bit more detail of some of the specifics of that, like what you saw that was missing, and then how you sort of put those pieces together to now follow your calling?
Right. Yeah, well, I think initially I started out as a coach of women's programs, and thanks to Gabe Rude, who's with US Club, he gave me really my first break with a high level soccer team. And prior to that, I'd coached multiple sports, whether it was track and field or swimming. I'm from a multi-sport background, so that was kind of a blessing for me, because I did have a background in a lot of different sports. And when I really got into coaching, I loved the other coaches. Of course, I love the players. It's always been my focus. And I love the game. I love the strategy side of it. I wasn't an amazing player myself, but I really had an appreciation for the level of skill that was required for the game of soccer. And as I started progressing up in my coaching and getting higher opportunities, two things really stood out for me. One was that there was a huge, deficit in care in regard to male athletes. And I know this might seem surprising for some people, but as I was coaching female teams, and then I was being involved with male teams, male athletes, as a former female athlete, don't get me wrong, I absolutely love female athletes, but I was almost finding that they weren't the ones that really needed the care as much as young male athletes who were transitioning from, a 14-year-old upcoming promising athlete to becoming 16, 17, 18, moving into college and becoming a young man. And what I was discovering was that due to our culture of sport, and more so with boys than girls, is that they had been ingrained to handle everything that was thrown at them. It's just part of being an athlete. You know, you're conditioned to get on with it, to overcome, and what I was finding was that it was the same environment for boys and girls, but girls were more reluctant to seek help and to ask for help, whereas the boys would just completely bury themselves with the fear of, if they said anything wrong, how would that be perceived by their teammates? Would they be perceived as weak by their coaches? And so they just buried any feelings that they had and anything that they were trying to deal with. And really, you know, there's a lot of amazing coaches out there, but this is a unique skill set that's required in order to help these young people make that transition from being a high-level youth athlete to being an elite player, and then dealing with the hormonal changes, relationship changes, school changes, independence, leaving home. It was an area that just wasn't being addressed, and it was blowing my mind because like, as an athlete, I can't tell you how many people I had in Australia looking after me. I had sports science, I had nutritionist, I had sports psych, and they created an environment where it was really hard to fail. And I was looking at the demands placed on these athletes, and I was just going, you can't do it. Like,
it's almost like you're setting them up to fail versus what you were in, which is like, if you fail, like, you really have to try to fail, you know, almost with all that support and
absolutely. And it's not to be critical of say an organization like US Soccer, because they do their best with the resources that they have, but coaches can only do so much. There's huge, they're already looking after, you know, anywhere from 20 to 30 individuals on their team.
You're talking about at the college game, correct? Like, this is
you know, the
not the
college
average
and
youth.
yeah, the college and I guess the, you know, high end ECNL elite teams.
yeah.
These coaches were already, they're maxed. And so then to ask them to be aware of an athlete's mental health, it's just not possible, because it's very rare to find coaches who that's their only sole source of income. So one, there's just not the funding there to allow coaches to develop 100% of their time for their athletes. So I guess I thought a lot about it and thought, how can I be super effective, stay in the sport at the high level, have access to male teams, because that's another story in itself, being a female coach, and the barriers that I faced trying to even break into coaching male teams. I thought, how can I be part of a team, be part of a collective coaching resource? And I just thought, well, performance coaching, which incorporates sports psychology, nutrition, sleep, everything to do with performance, I think I can do that, and I think I can make a difference. So that's what I'm trying right now.
Right on. Let's rewind a little bit. So you played soccer growing up, but you transitioned to actually compete for Australia and the triathlons. Back in 2007, you finished as high as 7th, actually above Joanne King, who finished silver medal in 1999, right? So you finished above her, which is pretty impressive. So how did you transition from soccer to competing in triathlons to what made you go back to get your master's? So, and also what I'm interested in, as a high level athlete who's competing around the entire world, how did you finish your education, your bachelor's, your master's, your PhD? Like, so if you don't mind kind of starting that little transition and how you got to where you are now.
Okay, so 100% full transparency, I'm still in school, and will probably be in school for a while, because I would like to continue on and do a PhD. So I think my poor husband's given up on me it really ever contributing financially, because I've been a poor student, and that prior to that I was a poor struggling athlete. So but going all the way back, like I said, I was a multi-sport athlete, and I played a soccer at a state level. I was a 6. I have a terribly weak shot, but I knew the game. I was more like a distributor, and I had very high endurance. So the coach just basically just a workhorse, I just got left on the field the whole time. I played touch football, track, swimming, track and swimming at a national level. And I was identified, I guess, by who turned out to be my coach, Galen Clues, as someone came up to my parents at a come try triathlon day and said, we think Belinda may have great physiology for triathlon. And to be honest, I was just a freak at sports. So I was like, oh, cool. It's 3 sports in one. That's what I thought when I first started triathlon. I actually wasn't interested in triathlon other than the fact that it gave me the opportunity to do more sports.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess I was a realist, knowing that my soccer talent wasn't at the level that I saw other players being at. And you know what? You have to have that realization at some point. When you have aspirations to be a professional, you also have to be a realist. So I said to them, I was really upfront. I was like, does this give me the opportunity to be a pro athlete? Because I really don't want a real job. I just want to be a pro athlete my whole life. And they were like, we think so. We think you have an awesome engine, and let's just try. So long story short, I turned pro after 2 World Junior Championships. I was ranked number 3 in the world as a junior, and then transitioned into being a pro. And then that was sort of the rest was history. But Kris, you make a really good point of how did I manage all of this? Well, reality was I didn't. I dropped out of college after a year and decided to go overseas and compete. So I was really lucky that I had 2 parents who were incredibly supportive, and they just said, go for it. So, if the worst that happens is that you crash and burn and you have to come back to college, well, okay. And so I didn't come back to college till post my career. And that is the journey. And in between that, there were 4 children. So I've been busy.
Wow.
Yeah, I've been busy, and I'm still in school, and it's kind of sad because I'm like the oldest person in all my classes all the time. Yeah. But they also kind of think I guess it's cool because I've had a lot of life experience, and I feel like that contributes a lot. And sadly, and I know you guys will appreciate this. Sadly, I feel that athletes do not really get any recognition for, say, 12, 15 years of that life experience. We finish our career and we're a former pro athlete. And as I made a joke at a sports psychology conference recently, I said, I'm the only person speaking today without a PhD or without this or without that, but I have FPA at the end of my name, which is former pro athlete. And I really feel like athletes should at least be given some kind of credit for the years that they dedicated to being an athlete, because it's a huge sacrifice.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, there's an old saying that when people are applying for manager positions, you're not paying me for the hourly work that I'm doing now. You're paying me for the 20 years of experience that I have up to this point. Right. And you're right. Yeah, I think you're right. That playing experience does go a long way. I think that's why US soccer recognizes that to a certain extent, and you can kind of excel in your licenses because it's a full-time job. The NCAA, Jason and I talk about this all the time. They say you're a student athlete because they expect you to do 20 hours a week of studying and in-class work and homework, and 20 hours is what they allot soccer to do. So that's 40 hours, and they say it's a full-time job, but then they say you're not a professional athlete. I disagree. If you're doing 40 hours a week of studying and soccer or sports in general, and that's what your expectation is, it's a full-time job, you're a professional athlete at that level, but then they don't allocate, like you're saying, the resources to have you being successful. You look at Future 100, Future 500 companies, and they have wellness, in their insurance packages, and you have vacation and time off, and it's really not periodized that way. And so, what are your thoughts, kind of on that side? Or you're involved now, so you're at UC Irvine working with men's soccer, men's water polo, one other one, correct?
Yes, and I'm also with J Sarah, which is a high school water polo team, one of the top in SoCal. And I think a few lights went on for me while I was coaching ODP last year, and I was just implementing a little bit of sports psych of, what I was finishing up at school, and I was really seeing sort of huge benefits. So this may come across like I don't know, but I'll say it anyway. I don't care. So I was looking for a team to. I had done a little bit of case study or work on my ODP team, and I thought, it worked well, but I really would like to execute my sports psychology kind of team cohesion program on an older team. So I was aware that, for example, in the UK for soccer, they're now implementing wellness coaches for some of the top teams. And I thought, that's awesome. I'm going to reach out to somebody and say, how would you feel about me coming in and looking after your athletes? I have this background. I have a coaching background. I can talk the language of the players, but my primary focus is their well-being. A lot of people said no, like, we're not interested, or we've got it. And Yossi Raz at UC Irvine, he said I called him 5 times. I actually called him 10. So I just didn't give up, because I thought, well, he won the Big West, and why I kind of preempted saying this may go the wrong way. But after I got 7 rejections, I just decided, you know what, stuff it. Who won this competition? I'm just going to go straight to the top. I'm just going to find out who won the Big West. They're winners. I want to work with winners, and I want to work with people who have that mindset. So he was in the final for the Big West last year with Santa Barbara. I reached out to him and said, hey, Yos, this is what I'm trying to do. I knew he was a foreigner, originally from Israel. And so I thought maybe he'll be more sympathetic to an Aussie coach, female, just out of the box.
Sure.
And thankfully he was, and he's been amazing, like incredibly receptive, incredibly supportive. And so we're on that journey right now. And it is a journey, because you don't always get it right the first time. And we're trying to kind of navigate the wellness side and the mental health and the sports side, but also these boys still need to execute the game and play really well. So we're on a journey.
What are some of the things that you do, like, within your curriculum or your plan? Like, what are some of the tangible things you might be able to share with us and our audience about kind of how you put that into action?
Right. Well, so one of the distinct areas that I noticed when I was coaching is that as I was progressing and working with more elite players in teams, what I was finding was that their mentality shifted away from being a team member to being an individual athlete. And I thought, this is crazy, because these guys are in a team environment and they're operating like I used to but I was an individual athlete, so I could operate like that. But their mindset was shifting from just being all about themselves. And obviously, when you're trying to create team cohesion, that's not the right mindset to have. So I approached, the idea I approached was that we need to collectively get everyone on the same page. My focus is around team cohesion and establishing a culture, a winning culture, but also creating a culture. And this is where I feel I may be a little bit different. And some people may disagree with this approach, but hey, whatever. I try to build my teams with the coaches on care and compassion, and to acknowledge that, hey, we may not all get the same playing time, but we all are working towards the same goal, and we all provide something necessary that we can't succeed without, whether that be you're an active team member on the bench, whether that be you're more of in a supporting role than, say, an execution role on the field. And really, when you create an environment like that, it brings the players alive, and their talent and the years of playing. For example, there's not one player on the UCI team that hasn't been playing soccer since age 4. So they've got it. We just need to connect them and give them confidence, and they will thrive and under the guidance of great coaches. But if you don't have that connectedness in a team, you have 11 individuals who are awesome but are not connecting.
Right.
And so it was like, that's what my focus is.
That's interesting that you say that, because I noticed role ambiguity is one of the biggest factors where athletes are unhappy and they start self-doubting, they get angry, disruptive at training sessions. Working with college goalkeepers at that level, it's incredibly difficult. We have 3, 4, sometimes 5 goalkeepers for one position. And it's not like outfield positions where if you get recruited in as a freshman center back, you might transition into the midfield as a holding mid or something, or outside back while you wait for your time in the middle. It's just you're playing or you're not. And 2 can go and 2 can't. So what are some tips for some of the coaches watching? How can you help, whether it's your club team of 18 or your college team or whatever it is, where you have 30 something guys on the roster or girls? What are some ways they can help with role ambiguity? Because I know, like you said, they get overwhelmed. They're working X's, O's, administration stuff with the ADs, all that kind of stuff, scheduling. But the players don't. And as an assistant coach, I do love being an assistant coach at the college level, because I just watch everybody and I'm looking at, hey, who's doing this and why? And then, Jason and I talked about it. I ask them, what questions would you ask me? And if I was you, I'd say, why am I not playing, coach? So let's have this conversation. Like, what's my role? But the players don't know how to do that. What are some things that you guys have done to help with that, where everyone is cheering from the bench? I think it's very hard to be friends with somebody, but you want their spot on the field.
I think it's, first of all, one of the first steps that I take when I'm working with group is to, first of all, get the players feeling good about what it is. Well, we all need to get on the same page. So what is our value system? And let's align our value system. What do we really care about, and what are we collectively working towards? And what will happen in that process is that initially you will have some people go, I'm just here for me. I'm here because I want to go pro. And you're always going to get that. But through, I guess, first of all, establishing what does each individual bring to the team? What are you valued for? And how do we utilize that? How do we utilize that when you're playing and when you're not playing? And also educating the team to understand that while you may not be on the field, say, as much as person X and your person Y, if collectively we get the result, we all benefit. It's not one person, and you're part of a winning program. And when the success is shared and people are celebrated for what they do for each other, and whether that be in training and just lifting the intensity, whether that be being acutely aware, like I often assign players buddies, for example, and we have a rotating buddy system where they have to hold each team member accountable at training. So the level of intensity is always high. And it's just getting the team to change their mindset from me to us, and hey, we're all on the bus. And if you're not on the bus heading in the direction that we want to go, well, leave. Like, it's pretty simple. Like, okay. And I often say to the boys, what happens if you get on a bus and you're half in and half out? And someone said, well, you're going to slow the process down. 100%. You'll slow it down and you'll get hurt, whether that be physically, emotionally. If you're not collectively on board with what coach is implementing and with what the values of the team have established, and really empower the athletes to create the environment they want. So they come up with the rules. They come up with discipline reaction, not the coach. So, for example, the water polo team at UCI, they decided that if one person was going to be punished, everybody was in, that they all got it, regardless of if they were part of it or not. And if one person was going to be made to do sprints because they were late, the whole team had to do sprints. Another team chose to have the person who was, say, the example was a person was late or is a discipline reaction, have that person watch the rest of the team do it. And, you know, you're creating, that was an interesting move by the team. The players decided on it. But since they put that plan in place, nobody has dared to stuff up, which is good.
Yeah.
So I'm a big advocate for being more of a facilitator. So planting the seed for the players to say, hey guys, this is what we can do, but what do you want to do? Because at the end of the day, I knew this as myself as an athlete. My coach can't do my event for me. I'm not on the field. I'm not whispering in their ear. We don't have earpieces. They have to own it, and they've got to take over. So, and it takes a really courageous coach to have faith and confidence in their players to really step back. And you don't have to control everything. Like, let your players empower them, and they will love you for it, and they will thrive.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's fantastic. There's so many great pieces there. Like, we could probably talk for days on this, just with you on this topic. I was kind of, before you said ownership, like they have to take ownership, I was thinking through that, and that was just what was coming to mind, you know, and you just filled it right in when you said they have to take ownership, because I feel like it's so difficult, so easy to say what that is, like just to say, oh, take ownership in some sort of broad sense. But those are very detailed, specific for anyone listening. Like, you're probably getting great takeaways like I am. Those are very specific ways to help facilitate the opportunity for the players to take ownership, right? Because as coaches, I think we do run into that a lot, where we feel like we are absolutely responsible for every single aspect of what's going to happen. Discipline, vision of the program, it's all coming from the hierarchy at the top of that pyramid. But I think what you're talking about is a whole shifted paradigm. It's like a different form of hierarchy. It's more of a collective, where the coach has to be in a position, or wants to create a situation where they're facilitating and creating this environment. And then you have to have the guts to kind of let it play out, right?
You do, because it's not to say that it will work every time. It can backfire.
No, sometimes it will fail. Like, it will definitely fail in order to get to
Totally.
that, right?
Oh,
Yeah.
100%. And, you know, full credit to the 3 coaches that I work with, Yossi Raz, Dan Klatt, and Brett Ormsby. Now, Brett Ormsby and Dan Klatt, both former Olympians. Yossi, a player himself, and, you know, huge coaching resume. I'm just super grateful that I have the opportunity not just to work with elite players, but I'm working with elite coaches who want to be better. And so they're saying, well, let's try it, Belinda. If it doesn't work, we go back to the whiteboard. And I love that, because it's trusting my process. You're trusting the players. And in turn, the players will then gravitate more towards us. And I want them to be closer to me for the wellness and mental health reasons, because I need to be able to get them help before, you know, if I need to facilitate a process, not only to help their performance, but if we need to put something in place to get them the help that they need outside of the sport, I need them to trust me to be able to share. And the coach needs the trust, not only to execute his grand plan, but also just to have that mutual respect. And I really believe it can work, but it is a process.
What are some of the biggest things that you deal with on that spectrum? You know, burnout or some of the social pressures. What are some of the things that are crippling these players in their performance that, you know, you hit head on?
I think the top 3, and I thought about this earlier before, you know, speaking with you both, the top 3, depending on high school or college, but really this is the number one, that came in is letting their teammates down, whether it be through lack of ability, lack of performance. It's not through lack of effort. It's through, am I capable enough to do what the team is asking me? And so when we look at that topic alone, it's a self-esteem issue. So we need to just look after those players and build up their self-esteem and their own confidence. If they're not really liking themselves, it's very difficult to get others to like you. So it's really trying to build your self-esteem, build your confidence, that not that, hey, I'm a rock star, but more of, I'm a valued player, I'm a valued team member, and really like owning that and having confidence that you wouldn't be here if the coach didn't think that you're amazing. And for D1 college in particular, that really says a lot. Like, guys, don't doubt yourself. You've been picked, you've been scouted. Now embrace that, work on it, because it's all very well to go and work on shooting goals, but if you're not working on your self-esteem, how do you expect to handle the ups and downs that come with sport? Like, you need to, it's a daily thing. You need to consistently be working on your own self-esteem. The second is the managing the school load, social life, and how do I do this? How do I handle my academics, my social life, my sport, my family without going crazy? So that's, number 2. And surprisingly, number 3 is in line with how others perceive me. It's borderline between body dysmorphia and like, they're always comparing themselves. Athletes are always comparing themselves to other people. Oh, he's more cut than me, I'm not as fit as him. And something that was taught to me a long time ago, and the analogy is, it's not the bike, it's the engine, is that you have to, and then that trickles back to having high self-esteem. You have to have the belief that what you bring is valuable, regardless of what you look like, or don't compare yourself to somebody else, because there are lots of different positions on the field. Every player is valuable, and find what your skill set is and then just embrace it and work hard at it. And don't keep doing these comparisons, because it's not one soccer player that will win the game. It's everybody. So
one question, 2 follow-ups to it. So what are some tips on building player confidence? And then how can coaches help? How can athletes manage their self-esteem on their own?
Okay. So tips for confidence. I think, again, I like to step outside the arena of sport and put things in perspective. And the best way that I can relay this is a story that I have about when I won my, first Ironman, and I beat the world champion, and I was in Malaysia, and I was in this fancy hotel. It was in Langkawi. It was very nice. And I just had won the event, and I got this gigantic trophy. And if you've ever been to Langkawi, it's an interesting kind of mix of structures, because you have these huge hotels, and then right next door you have these like shanties of people living out of, almost cardboard boxes. It's quite amazing. So I was in my room, we're all about to go out, and I'm alone, and I look out the window and I look down, and I was early 20s when this happened. And I looked down and I saw this family of these little kids being washed in a bucket, in Langkawi. And the dad was hosing them, and the mum was sitting outside making dinner, and they were so happy. They were so unbelievably happy. And I looked at that and was like, and looked at my trophy, and I was like, that established to me what I started to realize, what is my value system? What really matters? Let's keep perspective in life. I've been blessed with athletic ability. I love what I do, but it's not the universe, and that happiness can be found anywhere. And I guess I decided my sport wasn't going to be my sole level of happiness, and I would derive my happiness from other areas of life as well as my sport, to be more balanced. So my belief is that building self-esteem comes from having a balance and appreciation for what it is you really value in life, and not to make your sport kind of the nucleus of that, because sport is fleeting. We're only a couple of injuries away from retirement, and then we all, as you know, Kris, we all retire in our 30s, and it's like, what? What do I do now?
Things start breaking. as I know best.
Like I was just talking to Simon Thompson, who's a former Olympian triathlete, the other day, and I said to Simon, can you believe some of the training that we used to do? And he goes, Belinda, I can barely get out of bed in the morning.
Yeah.
So it's like, guys, love your sport, put everything into it, but have perspective. And in order to gain perspective, you may need to compartmentalize other areas of your life. So you have your team and your soccer team, which you love and you put 100% in, but let's have friends outside of sport. Let's be involved in the community. Let's really value our family. Let's find other ways to stimulate happiness, because if an athlete or a player establishes their confidence and self-esteem purely on their sport, they won't have longevity. Sport is too brutal, and you need to look at, I'm always talking to athletes saying, let's look at the big picture. And when they do that, they'll find themselves smiling and laughing and like realizing, yeah, like if I make a mistake on the pitch tonight, nobody dies. It's not brain surgery. So let's just do our best, but let's keep perspective.
Yeah, it's a great message.
I think that's awesome. And I try to remind athletes of this all the time. If you're hitting 300 in baseball, that's 3 every 10 times you're at bat. If you score 3 out of 10 shots that you shoot, that's pretty good for a forward. You're scoring 3 goals every 10 times you shoot.
Right.
That's 30%. That's still an F.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Sports are all about failures, right? It's all about failures and statistics. And the thing is, if you're in the low 20s, 30s of your sport, you're probably doing pretty darn good. And I think that's the hard thing for young athletes is, like you said, they want to contribute, they want to be consistent, but it's a roller coaster. And so that's good. So I'm going to take from what you're saying to build confidence and self-esteem is don't identify who you are as a person based on one thing you do. You're still, Belinda, the person, the mother, the wife, the friend, all these things, not just Belinda, the coach. And that's what these athletes also have to understand to build their self-esteem and confidence.
Oh, 100%. And the athletes will really thrive. And I know I have the luxury of hindsight. It's been, a good 10 years since I was competitive, and I'm grateful to say I've got wiser during that time. But I often tell athletes, I was working with Jay Sarah on the weekend, and I was telling the boys in the bus, I was a jackass as an athlete, and
Jason and I have had some conversations about that.
Yeah, I was super difficult, and I remember I didn't handle injuries very well because I was very impatient. I wanted to be the best tomorrow. And my sports scientist who I worked with at the AIS, his name was Gerald. He used to tell me, Belinda, this is character building moments for you. And I would scream back at him, I don't need my character build. Like, I was such a brat. But now as an adult, I realize, hey, that's why I am so resilient. That's how I can take 7 rejections and still keep going. That's why I can manage 4 children. And I've been married for 20 years. Sport has taught me so much that I guess matriculates into all areas of life. And as an athlete, I didn't see that. And I guess one of my reasons for trying to support athletes in every way I can is to share what I've experienced, not just, the winning, I can help you run fast, I can, get you to do this. No, it's about having the right mindset. So you not only enjoy your sporting career while you have it, but you will thrive later in life because you take what you've learned from school, from sport, and you apply it into school, you apply it into your marriage, you apply it into your work, you apply it into your children and your friendships. And it's that same mentality of wanting to be better. And a lot of athletes, well, I didn't as an athlete, a lot of athletes don't see that. So that's kind of part of the process.
Well, I was going to say to kind of piggyback on that a little bit is also, it's your age, right? It's like, you just don't know what you don't know, and you're a young person and you're growing. So it's so important to have people around you. Like, perspective really also comes with experience. And if you don't have that experience, like you're getting the experience, but it's almost like you don't even know it, right? Like you mentioned about your character building. So I think one of my takeaways there, and just listening as that the coach side of it is, to help your players gain that perspective, but they're going to have these experiences. So to sort of, we try to micromanage things sometimes, or you want somebody just to specifically, get something out of this thing. It's like, it may not happen today. If you ask someone if they're a good coach, it's almost like, well, come talk to me right in 20 years, right? I don't know, because
Right.
you won't know until these kids grow up, until
Right.
you're here today talking, and I'm sure your coach would be just smiling, right, about all these things that
Yeah.
you've got in your life now because of that. So it's just pretty awesome stuff.
And on the player side, for the players listening, I cannot urge you enough to just stay humble, because on that other side, I was the athlete that, kind of like what you said, Linda. I was like, I got it. I know, but you don't. I
Right.
mean, these coaches, we got 10, 15, 20, 30, sometimes 50 years of knowledge. And you may hear what we're saying and understand that, but stay humble and open, because at the end of the day, they're only trying to help you. And
Yeah.
I wasn't always open to that, and it did, it stunts you. And you gotta, one of my, even in my coaching career, Carlos Herrera told me, just go through all the courses, start over again, show some humility. And I did, and I think it really helps. That's actually how I met you,
Yeah.
starting over again. And it's more the road of the road that you're going to take in your journey. Ultimately, just be patient, stay humble.
Oh, I love that. And that is just so spot on, Kris. And I think one of the things that I really want to encourage for coaches is not only help your athletes identify what their role is in the team, but know your role, and know your role as coach. Like, I often am talking to players about how interpreting coach behavior, for example.
Mm.
And I come from the era where if you talked when I was swimming, you'd get a water bottle chucked at your head. Like, it was a different world. Okay. I had some incredibly, like, tough coaches, and I'm not advocating that, because, you'll have child protection services on your doorstep. But I think I say to the athletes, when a coach is like screaming at you, or first of all, that's your coach, you're the athlete. It's not your best friend. It's not your dad. Okay. It's your coach. Understand, put the behavior in context. And for coaches, have confidence that don't try to be their best friend. Be authentic. Tell them some hard truths, because you'll probably do the best favor that you've ever done for them, rather than being worried about losing players. Understand what it is you want your players to learn, create your own value system in coaching, and execute. And you know what? If people aren't on your bus, they can go somewhere else. Like, and when you're like that, you'll have players that suddenly, one, will massively respect you, because they know you take your role seriously and you take them seriously, but you're not trying to replace something else in their life. And when you do that, it's very clear. We at UCI, we often talk about stay in your lane. Like Yossi said to me a few times, stay in your lane, Belinda. Because being a coach, sometimes I think, I wouldn't put that person there, and here I am saying that, and a person who's had like 20 years experience. And thankfully, him just being really direct and saying, Belinda, stay in your lane. Perfect. Okay, that's what I needed. And sometimes a coach needs to be able to articulate that to their coaching staff, in order to, I guess, create the right direction that he or she wants the team to go.
Absolutely.
Right on.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's a great point. And then, like, the authenticity factor, right? It's like, I sometimes I'll watch videos, I'm always searching for something on YouTube or whatever.
Yeah.
And I found this Benny Urquez. He's this incredible martial artist. And so people should look him up. He's in one of the greatest like
Oh,
kung fu movie fighting scenes of all time with Jackie Chan. But Master Benny, he was talking about that. He was getting an interview for someone who goes around and does all these classes, and was showing him, and they call him master. And he said, I'm not a master. He goes, he basically said, I'm looking to master me. Like that's mastery, is like mastering yourself. It's not about, so when you're looking at how we present ourselves, or what we're trying to do in our life as a coach or as anybody really, it's like, it's about you, and it's in you. And it always kind of just comes down to you, right? It's like,
right.
if I'm going to help somebody or connect with somebody, I have to be able to be authentic and true to myself. And whenever we're trying to play a role, or we think we need to be something we're not, right? It's like, you are good enough. It's just that you have to be okay with kind of being yourself. I think that's kind of a powerful message. But yeah, these are some huge takeaways. I mean, I really appreciate what you're saying, and I think it's important for for families too. We're talking about coaches. How about parents? When you talk about stay in your lane, like where are the rails, right? Because we see some of these parents too, where we want to help our kids obviously so much, and you love them. No one loves them more than you, but it's like, maybe it's more important to understand, well, if you really want to help them, maybe not yelling at them from the sideline, or not giving them the berating talk on the way home. And there's so many factors to that too, right? Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. I one of the things that I often get coaches come to ask me about, that parent who wants to be part of it, or is a little bit too full on, whether it's just because they were a former athlete themselves or really passionate. And I know I had to check myself when my own children started playing, and I have twin boys who play basketball, and I know nothing about basketball. But there were times where I'd find myself like trying to say stuff, and I'm like, Belinda, what are you doing? Like, seriously. And again, what is my role? And how can I really help my son who is an athlete? And so we need to be able to diversify and wear multiple hats. Berating your child who's probably already been berated, if not passively, by teammates or the coach in the car, is that really going to contribute to helping your child get back on track for their next performance? I'd say no. I'd say what will happen is it'll create more anxiety and more pressure, because they don't have a safe place that they could just, go back to. And one of the things which I've tried to create with working with college athletes who are away from their families is create that safe place to say, I understand that being brought into a D1 team, we need to win. I get that. But at the end of the day, I tell the players, my number one concern is you. I'm just an advocate for you. So if there's anything that's going on or you have concerns about, you can come to me. And if there's a situation going on with coach in regard to more playtime, well, that's coach. But when it comes to how you're feeling about perhaps your performance or your lack of performance, athletes need a place where they can go to talk about it, and for youth athletes, it's home. So they need that space to be able to articulate their frustration, and they don't need answers, because the answers come from the coaches. The answers will come from the support staff. But your role as a parent is to provide that kind of like a safety net where they can shoot for the stars, but you'll always catch them if they don't make it. And that will increase their confidence. And it'll give them more courage to do that when they know they have a place that has been created for them like that.
Wow. Yeah, that's great. I got a coach at the University of North Carolina, and one of our great alums is Heather O'Reilly. And I think it was Heather who was talking about her parents didn't even really pay attention to soccer that way, right? It was just kind of like, she's out here being this, this player of the year in youth and dominating all these things and becoming this incredible player. And it's like, your parents are just like, that's just mom and dad. They don't maybe even know every element and aspect of your team or anything, right? It's like some of the greatest players have kind of had sort of and you kind of hear the polarizing side of that too, where it's like, your parent was overly involved and they coached you in every aspect. And, then you hear this other side where a lot of times it's the complete opposite. The parents were very hands off. They just drove you to the game. Maybe sometimes they didn't even stay and watch. And, here you are. So there's definitely a lot of ways to go about that. And some may work better for certain families than others, for sure. But yeah.
And just on that parent who really wants to be involved too, because I came from the same place as Heather. I had parents that were both academics, and they loved me being happy. And if that meant taking me to 5 different sports during the week, and also to get rid of some of my energy so I wasn't annoying at home, they did that. But Dad would often do Sudoku during my events, or like he just wasn't. My parents, like, just to educate some of the listeners, swimming, for example, I think I worked out, that was part of my sport. 4:30 a.m. starts for easily 20 years. And before I got my license, my parents had to drive me there. And often I would wake up and I'd go, oh, I don't want to go today. Mum and Dad would go, oh, that's good, go back to bed. and then I'd go back to bed, feel guilty, because that's the type of athlete I was. And then I'd go, no, I'm going. And they'd be like, really? You don't have to. But I also appreciate the intense parent. And my biggest tip for coaches is give that parent a job.
Wow.
Give them a job. Make them feel like they're valued. Again, it all comes back to being appreciated and what they contribute. And when you give those parents who are highly enthusiastic, let them know that their role in the team could be, and for soccer, something that's always useful is stats. Who doesn't want stats? Find a really enthusiastic parent who wants to take care of the nutrition side.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
There's so much that we can use our parents for, to make them feel appreciated, and not to look at them as, oh, they're a pain. No, they're not. They just love their kids, and they may also, there's always the side issue that they may have had an unfulfilled athletic career. So they want to try to help their child have the sporting career that they never had. And it may come across as a negative, but it's not. They're just very enthusiastic. And the way to manage that is to channel their energy and make them feel valued. And when you have them on side, and I know that worked in ODP for me, I had these beautiful parents bringing me coffee without me even asking. Like, they just would bring me coffee to the field before games. They knew what I liked. And it was really nice, because we had this shared respect of, I appreciate what you do for your sons and your daughters. And this is what I'd like you to do. And in turn, they were like, we appreciate that you acknowledge us. And parents who don't get acknowledged will be frustrated and possibly damaging to the team.
You should manage that. Absolutely. Like, coaches out there, if you're, and especially in youth soccer, or even anything really, like you said, ODP, college, it doesn't really matter. You have to manage that. You have to understand that these parents, care more than anything about their kids. And so you're not going to be able to just put that aside or bury that. Like, it will show up somehow. So being proactive is a huge benefit to the culture, really, right? To the whole environment.
And you might get free coffee. So
you might get free coffee. Who knows where this could go, right? Free coffee.
If look at it from a triangular perspective. You have the players, which I always like to put at the top of the pinnacle, and then you have the coaching and support staff, and then you have the parents and the family. They're always going to be there. Trying to ignore that they're not going to be there, you're creating problems for yourself. And just create the trilogy of, where does our focus always need to be? And remind that to the parents, like, fighting with the coaches, is that really contributing towards your athlete doing better? Disagreeing with what the coach feels is the best lineup. You can have your opinion, but at the end of the day, what is the best for the athletes? And keep the athletes in the focus at the top of this sort of triangular communication. And when we all do that, and I put myself just in the coaching staff, that's when we'll really experience success, and ultimately success for the athletes. That's why we're here. That's what we're doing.
Right? Yeah.
Like,
And
without them, we have no jobs.
and one easy tip for the coaches out there, something I can't stress you enough, is maybe even just monthly press conferences. So at the end of a game, you text your team manager, say, "Hey, look, for all the parents that want to stay, I'm going to hold a little press conference." So you let them actually listen to your post game with your team. They see
Yeah.
your interaction with their kid, because remember that parents, all they ever want is what's best for their kids. And then afterwards, let the kids go play and tell the parents what you've been working on, how you thought the game was, what your pregame was, what your halftime was, and ask them if they have any questions. 90% of the time, they won't, and if they do, you can answer them, and whether they agree with you or not, they know there's a plan, and that
Yeah.
will help alleviate some of these things while bringing them on board, which is
Yeah.
what Belinda is saying.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I love that tip, Kris, because you're really including them and being inclusive in part of your process. I also feel that having a point of communication for parents is important. And I don't believe that should be the coach. I believe that needs to be someone independent, because the coach needs to have this neutral role where, they're doing their job and their focus, and they shouldn't, in my opinion, they shouldn't have easy access to the coach. That's not fair to the coach. It's not fair to the athletes. There should be either a point person who's like the team manager, and communication should be facilitated through that. That's not to say that the coach won't talk to that parent or make time for them, but as part of being a team, you're one person on 28, 30 roster, and be respectful to the coach that they're doing a lot and they're managing a lot, and they're managing all these individuals, and depending on the age group will determine how difficult that is.
Yeah.
Sure.
But I even find at the college level, I often look at the young men I'm working with, I see bigger versions of my own sons, and I just think they're so young. Like, they're so young and they have so much to learn. Like, we need to nurture them, and putting these processes in place where you can have concerns about what's going on with your child under the coach, but the coach is looking at the team in a big picture. So when you're only looking at your child, you may only see a tiny part of that picture. And so at least having someone where you can channel your frustration. I feel sorry for the manager, but we'll look after them somehow with wine or whatever. We need to have that channel, because I'm a huge fan of the coaches that I work with, and I also want to protect them because their job's not easy. And the more we can streamline communication and alleviate their stress, the better they will perform too.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, I know I run into that a lot with the way that I communicate. I like to be very direct and I like to be open. So one thing I tried actually on the Kris's line there, where we do the press conference, like the post game, I would do for like my middle school teams, or even high school. I type after every game, I do an email, but my email is a press release. It's just a game recap. It's like exactly what you'd get in college. The date, the opponent, the score, a little box score, and then the coach's interview. I like make a quote about what I thought. And I always found that was a good way to communicate with the parents and the players, because you know how we do in college or professional level, you talk to your people through the press, right? You
Right.
have an intermediary. So I think like clubs looking out there, if you want to do something to take it to a new level and like help sort of facilitate the communication, is like be proactive ahead of time. Like do your own little game recaps, or do something that has a sort of a press release kind of feel to it, so people can stay informed on what's going on, what you're thinking, what maybe even what happened when they weren't at the game. And it kind of gets a way to feel people involved. But back to your point about the buffer, you're in some situations where you can create that, right? And then there's sometimes where I feel like, for me directly, I have trouble with that. Like I don't know how I can. It's like you have to recruit the right kind of person to help you with that, I think, obviously. So if you find the right person, that's great. If not, I do find myself in that position where I'm sending out all the emails. My phone number is available. Anyone can call me anytime. And, sometimes it's great, but back to your point about really that, and to Kris too, about the burnout and the things like that, it does get you after a while. Like sometimes you get in these ebbs and flows where it's just a grind, and you can't really, even as much as you want to be able to communicate that day or that week or whatever, you just can't, like you really can't. And so I don't know if you have any more direct advice to somebody in that situation. I know for me, it's going to me directly kind of right now, because I want to communicate with everybody. I want to be open and available. It's part of that, having that relationship that I try to have, which is a lot more, I think it's a lot more available.
Right.
But, managing that when you may not be in a college, or you may not, like, what are some tips?
Yeah.
How do you keep your sanity amongst all the managing of that type of communication?
Well, one thing that was taught to me by my mentor in psychology, Dr. Lupe, she said to me straight away when I kind of transferred from coaching and moving into this sports psych field of still being with teams, and predominantly now doing something where I'm really just caring about them, but helping their performance. She said to me, Belinda, you have to establish boundaries. And I really feel that coaches need to do the same. And it's hard to do that when they do have your number, and when we are all working towards the same goal of producing a great performance, and you do love your athletes. But I found that her advice was fantastic, because I then implemented, for example, for the players, I implemented a system where and you can just do it. I use the app Calendly, and Calendly is where you can put times that you're available, and you can either have a Zoom or you can have a call. And so that they know that I can be accessible on these days, but not these other days. And just to create these boundaries so that they know that you are available when you're there for them. But I know myself, I don't know about anybody else, I'm not being paid enough to be on 24/7. And
no, absolutely not. Yeah.
And also, I don't want to get a divorce. I need to look after my husband and my kids. And I naturally would talk sport 24/7 if I didn't mentally stop, because I'm just I love it. I love the athletes. They could move in and camp on outside. That's kind of how much I care for them. But my family doesn't feel the same. And so even yesterday, I had an athlete send me a text and said, I'm dealing with something. And I said, how urgent is what you're dealing with? Because I'm now in a different sort of arena. And he said, no, well, it's just something that I'm feeling. And I said, well, I'm going to send you through my links of when I'm available. But if these times don't suit you, or you feel that it's really urgent, then text me back. And then sure enough, he found a time that was suitable. And so therefore I could get back to my Sunday with my family. I think I made the mistake as a coach, is that we often are too accessible for people, and coaching and sport just infiltrates every area of our life. And I know for my husband, he was starting to resent it. He was just there was just always soccer or sport or track. There were always athletes, and I would forget to ask how his day was or what he was doing. And I think as coaches, we need to really look after ourselves, because, and I know you guys will agree with this, they're going to move on from us. We're going to have them for a short period of time, then the athletes move on. Our family and the other areas are with us for life. And so we need to ensure that as much as we're passionate about what we do, again, it comes back to perspective, value system, and then creating boundaries.
Right. And that's that balance that you're looking for, right? When we talk about that, we want that for our athletes. We have to also create that for ourselves. And also you're modeling exactly that kind of behavior. You're showing them a path, like one version of that they can look toward. That's powerful stuff. Thanks. Yeah, thanks for all the good insights. I'm sorry, I'm over here all right. If any of my parents are listening, by the way,
I'll just send you my bill.
I'm unavailable. Good luck.
I'm sitting, I'm processing everything. And one thing I also started thinking about is okay, how do I do this in my own life, and where do I fail? Because Jason and I talk about all the time the roles that we have with all the different hats we're wearing, and asking for help. I think about that too. Like I do not ask for help enough. To Jason's point, getting information out there. My club, we do a monthly kind of video chat, but that would never happen if I didn't have a communications director who hired a videographer,
Right.
and then she chases me down and it's like, you got to sit down and do this with me, and or else it never happened. And what a valuable thing. And I think us asking for help from people goes a long way. And one of my very first technical directors told me, I said, oh, I don't have a budget. He goes, go ask people to volunteer. Don't be afraid to ask people to volunteer, because people will want to help you, because if you're coaching their kids, they want everyone to be successful. And I think, to what Belinda said, putting people to work is a good thing. It gets them involved, makes them feel valuable as parents. I have two last questions for you, Belinda. So, part of what we do is I like to bring people on, and Jason, from different walks of life, people who've played in the college game, people who are coaching all over, sports psychologists. You were a professional athlete who decided not to do college. You were doing college, but decided to pursue your career and then go back. And oftentimes what Jason and I do is we try to convince people to do the opposite, to go to college and play and then pursue your career. So my two questions are, if you could do it all over again, would you do it the same way or differently? And the follow-up to that would be, what would be your advice through your experience as a professional athlete for players?
Well, first of all, you started off sort of, your talk with saying, like, asking for help and surrounding yourself with good people. I think that has to be the foundation. Find a group of people that you can trust, whether that be a mentor, an advisor, someone who will give you a reality check if you need one, particularly if you have these grand aspirations to be a pro. You need to at least have people you can trust who will either tell you, yes, it's a possibility, or no, it's a pipe dream. And that can be really hard to hear, but it can also give you the opportunity to pivot and change direction. And that's what happened for me really with coaching, is that I loved coaching, but I also knew that my skill set of where I could really excel may not be in coaching. And it took me 10 years to work it out. And so for athletes, when you're deciding what path you want to go on, first of all, get some advice from people around you that you trust, people that have had more experience than you. And I was really lucky that I had, my coach who was a former athlete and also a sports psych. But when I made that decision to drop out of college, I think I just was following my dream and of being a pro. And also I wasn't afraid to fail, because I was like, what's going to be worse if there's an opportunity? And I saw an opportunity because I lived in Australia, and for us, all the competition was either in Europe or the States. Training as a triathlete was 7 hours a day, 8 hours a day. Trying to do study was just impossible. I was either going to fail at study or fail at being an athlete. I had to weigh up, I've got to make a decision. So sometimes you need to make hard decisions and be ready for the consequence of it may not work out. But guess what? The process, you'll still get a lot out of the process, because you will be encouraged that you're following your dream. And for me, it took me away from my home. It took me overseas. I would spend 9 months of the year overseas. Sponsorship opened up, but I also had to get results before I actually made that position. So I established myself on I guess I got results first, sought advice, and then made hard decisions, knowing that I had done well enough in high school with a great GPA that if I wanted to return to college as an adult, which I have, I could do that. And I love telling that to athletes, to say, I'm not saying throw school away at all. I'm saying work really hard so that you have choices later in life. but you don't have to make that decision. If you're feeling burnout from high school and you're sitting in class, and for me, I was sitting in a lecture at Canberra University, and all I was thinking about was sport. I wasn't even concentrating. I was sitting next to a fellow athlete who was at the AIS. I think we both quit at the same time. And I was like, you know what? Where am I happiest right now? And if that's pursuing this dream, let's just go for it. And let's give it a really good shot. And sometimes people will set a time limit for that, to say, okay, I'm really going to work hard at this for 2 to 3 years. There was no money really in my sport when I first started, so I did have to work 3 jobs to be able to and then I got creative, and as I got better, I reached out to my sponsors and started working for them to say, hey guys, can we do a deal, because I need to keep training to get the results. You want me to wear your product. What can we do to complement each other? And one of my first sponsors was actually my employer, where I would work when I was home, and I would do things for the staff, share what I was doing as an athlete. But when I came back, I was I was a manager for a complaints department at an electricity company.
Oh,
Okay.
wow.
Yikes.
So it was not the
Cool
enviable job.
Yeah, that's a
But
rough one.
if you really are pursuing a goal, understand a couple of things. It's not going to come easy. It's not going to be handed to you. You have to be creative, because it's a highly competitive industry. So you have to, if you're trying to create something to help you live your dream, you have to make yourself marketable. And I'm not saying it doesn't have to be in looks, but sponsorship is a business. So you need to provide something of value to them.
Right.
And sometimes the results are enough, and sometimes it's not.
Yeah.
So that's where a great education comes in, so you can be employable. And I guess just have no fear. I've never had any fear. And I think that comes from having older brothers that used to beat me up. Just
Had a couple of those.
Don't be afraid to try something and it not work out, because I think you'll live your life happier than, say, having regret of, I wish I'd perceived that dream, and really backed myself. Because if you don't back yourself, how on earth are you going to get anybody else to back you? You just have to build that resilience. And you see that a lot with elite athletes who just have this, impervious disposition about themselves, where they just believe in themselves. And again, that comes back to the foundation of, I had a lot of people around me who also said, yeah, you can do it. So had that reinforcement, create that environment, create stepping stones to get to your dream, be creative, and work hard, work really, really hard, and it'll pay off. It will. There'll be a turning point where you'll go from having 3 jobs to 2 jobs to 1 job to no jobs to just, just doing what you love. But it doesn't happen overnight.
Well, that's amazing. Thank you for sharing all of your advice, experience. I hope you come back and talk with us. We'd love to just keep having you on here regularly. And I just learned a lot today, so I want to thank you. And I'll leave it at that, because I talk a lot, so I'll be quiet. Kick it over to Kris. That was awesome. Thank you, Belinda.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, that was amazing. I really appreciate you coming on, and definitely I would like to circle back around and even get postseason. So the NCAA league is kind of winding down here coming up, and then playoffs and all that. I'd love to hear perspective, because I know that's when things get really, nitty gritty for the athletes, and you have to start relying on more of them. And I think that would be super interesting to come back on and hear. So thank you for sharing your experiences and all your knowledge, and big thanks to Rising Star and Maverick Goalkeeper Academy, our 2 main sponsors, and we will be in touch soon.
Yeah, well, hey guys, I just wanted to finish by saying thank you so much for having me on. A little plug for Kris, and also sort of the other male coaches that I work with. Often sometimes male coaches don't get a good rap in regard to the support that they provide female coaches. And I have had both experiences, but I'd just like to say that it's really appreciated because female coaches are in the minority, but there are wonderful men out there in our sport, both in US soccer, Kris today, the schools that I work with, that really are working hard to empower women. So if there are any other female coaches out there who have had maybe a rough trot in establishing themselves as a coach, don't give up, because it is changing, and more people are really embracing female coaches and giving us opportunities.
Thank you for watching Taking Your Shot, the pathway to soccer success.